Jason from Wake Props here, and today we're going to show you how to replace the prop on an inboard boat using the Acme C-clamp puller. And this is something that applies if you have a damaged prop that you need to replace to put your backup on if you're out in the water for a day or a weekend. Also, if you buy an upgraded prop for better performance, then you'd also need to remove the prop that's currently on the boat. So we're going to use the Weekend Saver kit that Acme offers, and it's a nice padded bag that includes a storage spot for your spare prop on one side, so you can keep this in the boat. It's out of the way where nobody's going to kick it or damage it or get hurt by running into the edge of the blade. And on the other side, it's got a spot for storage of tools that you'll need. So we'll just run through these. So this is the C-clamp prop puller. It's what actually takes the prop that's currently on the boat off. You can buy this separately if you don't want or need the Weekend Saver or the tools that are included. So we'll use that C-clamp puller. Also includes a crescent wrench, a pair of needle nose pliers, and a replacement hardware kit that includes a new lock nut, key, and cotter pin to replace the components that are currently on the boat right now. In addition to that, we're also going to have a hammer and a 2x4 on hand. Just makes the process a little bit easier. It's not necessary, but if you have them around, it'll make things go a little bit smoother. So that's everything that you need to actually take the prop off and put the new one back on. Let's get to it. So the first thing to realize about basically every inboard boat shaft and propeller except for 2003 and newer Mastercrafts, which use a different system, is that the hub of the prop is actually tapered. It's wider at the back of the prop than it is at the front, and it's that taper that seats the prop onto the shaft correctly and holds it in place as the boat's moving through the water. So that's why having a puller is so important, because as you run the boat, the prop is actually driven further up onto the taper of the shaft, which makes it harder to remove. So it's not as simple as just removing the nut and pulling the prop off. Sometimes that happens, but usually the prop is fit onto the taper so tightly that you need to use some force in order to get it off. And C-clamp puller is a tool that you'll buy and you'll have as long as you own an inboard boat for. It's never going to wear out. It makes the process a lot easier. The first thing we're going to do is grab our crescent wrench and needle nose pliers and 2x4 if you've got it, just a scrap piece of wood. And we'll head under the boat here. So what we're going to do is use the 2x4 as a piece of blocking to actually prevent the prop from rotating while we loosen it. So we'll just wedge it there to start with. So first step is to use the needle nose pliers to go ahead and remove the cotter pin that should be in the end of the shaft. So just bend the one leg straight and then bring them parallel. You can tap it out with the pliers, grab it on the other side and work it out. So now that we removed the cotter pin, you can see that the nut is retaining the prop right now. So what we'll do is go ahead and loosen the nut on the shaft. We don't want to actually remove it completely, we just want to loosen it. So we just want to loosen it a little bit. So just a few turns. The purpose of that is that we want the prop to stay on the shaft when we bring it off the taper, which happens quite violently usually, and not fall all the way off the end. So the nut is loosened enough that we can pop the prop off of that taper, but it's not going to come flying off the end with the puller, damage the prop even more, or land on the foot or something that might be in the way. So next thing we'll do is grab the puller itself. You can see it's got a jaw right here that fits behind the prop and will sit on the back side of the hub of the prop between the prop itself and the strut that supports the shaft. So it just fits over the back. Loosen up the bolt here enough to slide it over the end. And now the puller is fully seated. This will work on any 3 or 4 blade inboard boat propeller. It will not work on the newer 5 blade props. There just isn't enough clearance. The blades overlap too much to be able to get the puller through. So for those 5 blade props, you have to use the harmonic style puller, which is a different setup that we'll showcase in another video. So now that we've got the puller on there, we're going to relocate our block over to right here, because we're going to be tightening the bolt on the end of the puller, and we want the block to wedge the prop in place so that it won't rotate. So we'll go ahead and just tighten up the wrench, and we're just going to apply pressure on the puller. Make sure that the cup is seated on the end of the shaft. It's got a lip, so it shouldn't work its way off, but you want to make sure that it's seated correctly so it doesn't pop off. And then just keep your hands free, obviously. So in this case, that prop came off really easily. Sometimes that's the way it works. Other times it's a lot more work, it's much more difficult, and you would just continue to tighten the puller down until it's fully snug. If you encounter a prop that's really tight, really wedged on there, you can go ahead and tighten, just with the wrench, tighten the bolt on the puller until it's snug, and then just tap the back side of the puller right here with a hammer lightly. Do that a few times, retighten, tap it a few times, retighten. Eventually you'll get enough pressure, and usually it'll pop off when you tap the puller one time. That will free up that mate between the shaft and the hub of the prop itself, and the prop will come off. So at this point we can go ahead and loosen the bolt all the way up, take the puller off and set it aside, grab our wrench again, and we'll go ahead and just loosen the prop up. So this nut is a nylock nut. It's got a nylon insert in it that the threads of the shaft cut into as you tighten the nut down. We recommend that you change this nut at a minimum every 3 times that it's removed. It's only usually good for about 3 times of use. After that, the threads are so cut in that it doesn't provide any restriction. So go ahead and slide the prop all the way off. The only important thing to keep track of is this key, which sits in the groove that's machined into the shaft and then matches up into the mating keyway on the prop, and that's what prevents the prop from rotating on the shaft once the boat's in use. Otherwise, the shaft would just turn inside the prop. So we'll hold on to that key along with our cotter pin. Set this old prop aside. So now we'll grab the new prop that we're going to replace. Grab our key that came out, and just inspect the surfaces of the key for any signs of extreme wear. This one looks fine. If you're replacing your nylock nut with a new nut that you purchased in a hardware kit, either as part of the Weekend Saver or separately, a new key will be included, and we recommend that you use that new key. In this case, this one looks fine, so we're just going to reuse it. So this shaft just happened to end up with the keyway oriented straight up and down at 12 o'clock. If it's not, it'll be a little bit easier if you rotate the shaft so that it lines up straight up, so that the keyway is at the top. That way the key just sits in it and you don't have to worry about it falling out. So just set the key into the keyway, make sure that it's not sitting up proud at all, that it drops fully down into the bottom of the keyway. Take the prop, and we'll align the keyway on the prop with the key at the top, and just easily slide it up there. Just you want to make sure it doesn't bind up at all. It should slide all the way up and mate up. Go ahead and grab your nylock nut. And throw it on by hand. And then we'll grab our 2x4 blocking again, wedge it under one blade. You want to put this blocking down at the base of the blade where it's closest to the hub of the prop. That's where it's thickest. If you put the block out at the end, the pressure from tightening the nut down can actually deform the blade, and you'll end up with a prop that's out of balance. So you want to slide this all the way down to the base of the hub where it's going to be the thickest, and that'll prevent any damage to the prop through the tightening process. So we'll go ahead and just snug up the prop nut on the shaft. At this point, the prop is just about to make contact with the face of the hub, or excuse me, the nut is just about to make contact with the face of the hub of the prop. So I'm going to go ahead and put the blocking in place just to provide some extra support, and then we'll go ahead and snug the prop up, the nut up all the way on the prop. And this doesn't need to be incredibly tight. That's tight enough. The taper of the prop and of the hub of the prop and the shaft are actually what's going to hold the prop in place. So the nut doesn't do anything to keep the prop from spinning. We just need to use the nut to hold the prop far enough up on the taper that you get a good tight connection between the two. So now we'll just grab our cotter pin, place it back into the shaft, tap it down, bend one leg of it up, and that's all there is to it. At this point, you got a prop back on the boat, and you're back up and running, ready to enjoy some time on the water, and you can use your backup prop, and if you have to send one in for repair, do that. You're ready to go.